Okay, so the very end, 9b, we're discussing that a korban olav yored, a variable offering. The very end of the Mishnah said that when it came to walking into the temple in a state of impurity when you weren't supposed to, so if you did it inadvertently, it's really liable a variable offering. Rabbi Eliezer says that the nasi, the king, only brings a goat. He brings a goat for that. He doesn't bring the usual offering. He just brings a goat, not a variable offering, which depends on one's financial status. So the Gemara is in the middle trying to figure out, does Rabbi Eliezer say a goat for all the variable offerings, or only for the impurity of going into the temple? So Amalei Rav Huna, Breder of Nasan, Rav Papa, Rav Huna, Breder of Nasan, son of Nasan, asked Rav Papa, Mimai, Dilma Rabbi Eliezer Akulukai. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer actually, when he says you bring a goat, he's referring to all three cases of variable offerings, whether it's the false oath you made, or whether it's going to the temple in the state of impurity. Maybe really for all those, you're going to bring a goat. If you're a king, you bring a goat. So, when it comes to the anointed Kohen, Rabbi Eliezer would hold like Rabbi Akiva that says you're exempt from any variable offering. So Amar Le, he told him, Rabbi Akiva, mi pater le mi par, the Sulomidi. He said, Rabbi Akiva himself says that you're not fully exempt. You still have to bring a bull. You're not totally exempt. The Sulomidi, and there's nothing more to talk about. So don't compare Rabbi Eliezer to Rabbi Akiva. And really, like we thought originally, like the Mishnah seems to say, Rabbi Eliezer says you're only liable a goat when it comes to one of the three variable offerings, specifically going into the temple in a state of impurity. Only for that one does Rabbi Eliezer say that you're liable a goat, and not for the other ones. Rabbi Yochanan, Modi Rabbi Eliezer she'ein mevi asham. Rabbi Yochanan says that Rabbi Eliezer will agree that you don't bring a asham. Who's not bringing an asham? The nasi. The king is not going to bring an asham. Good, thank you. So, Panikana Kameder of Sheshes. Asham Tali Ba Al Timas Nefesh Bekadasha. So, this opinion, this Tana said in front of Rav Sheshes, that when you walk into the temple and you're a doubtful status, or you're not sure if you're impure or not, and you walk in anyways, so until now, we saw that you do not bring an Asham Tali, but he says you do bring an Asham Tali. So, Amar Le, the Amar Lach, money, who's that opinion? Rabbi Eliezer, it's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer we saw yesterday. Since it says the word kares by that prohibition, it's going to have the same status as a regular set sin offering, and therefore one would bring an asham talui for walking into the temple in a state of in a doubtful state of impurity, the same way one would eat forbidden fats that are also doubtful. For both of those, you bring an asham talui. So nasi, you're allowed. Since it says kares like it does by a regular offering, a king will bring a goat for it. The Homer of Yochanan and Moder Rabbi Eliezer ain't maybe asham talui. But didn't Rabbi Yochanan say in the name of Rabbi Eliezer that you don't bring an asham talui? That's how we started. The line before that said that Rabbi Yochanan said that you don't bring, and yet this Brisa seems to say that Rabbi Eliezer would say you do bring. Seems to contradict Rabbi Yochanan. Says to him, you're right, Kasha, it's a difficulty. Next chapter. Now we're going to get the next two Mishnahs are going to be what happens when the anointed Kohen or the king, they sinned before they became king and they were anointed, and when they sinned after they were removed from their post. What happens to those errors? Do you still bring them or not? So, Kohen Mashiach Shechata V'Achakach Avram Mashiach. So you have an anointed Kohen who sinned. He sinned inadvertently, and then what happened? He left being Kohen Gadol. His term was over, so he was demoted for whatever reason. Also, a king that did something inadvertently. And then he's been removed as king. So what's the halacha? Kohen Mashiach maybe Parva Nasi maybe Seir. Kohen still brings a bull and a king still brings a goat. Yeah. So Mashiach Shavar Mashichaso the Achakachato, a little bit more novel case. What if he was removed from his post? The Kohen Gadol is no longer Kohen Gadol, and then he did an Avera. What's the halacha? A Kohen Mashiach, interestingly enough, even after he's been removed, but he's still going to bring that bull, as if he would, the same thing he would have brought if he was still Kohen Gadol. But the Nasi, the king, is not like that. The king, what we would have thought is once you've been removed, so you're like a regular guy, and a regular guy, you'll bring Hanasi Kehedyut, whatever a regular person brings for committing an inadvertent Avera, you will bring the same. But a Kohen Gadol is the novelty that even when he's been removed, seems like there's a level of sanctity that remains, which would obligate him in the same offering that he would have brought if he was still Kohen Gadol. Okay. So says the Gemara, Hashi Yishlomar Abram Mashichaso. Once he left, he's no longer appointed. And then he did a Veira, maybe par, and yet he still brings a bull, meaning the second case in our Mishnah, the end of our Mishnah, where he's no longer Kohen Gadol, but he still brings the same offering as if he was Kohen Gadol. So for sure, if you did an Aveira and then you were removed from Kohen Gadol, that's obvious. If you're no longer Kohen Gadol and you commit an Aveira and you bring a sacrifice, for sure, if you committed the Aveira while you were the Kohen Gadol and then you were removed, for sure you have to bring it. Isn't that obvious? Says the Gemara, yes. However, we need it for the next case. The Gemara says, you're right. The Kohen Gadol himself, there's no novelty, because we taught you that when he is no longer Kohen Gadol, he still brings a bull. Of course, if he sinned while still being Kohen Gadol, of course he's going to bring a bull. That's obvious. The case that's not obvious is when we contrast it to a king. The king, when he's been removed from his kingship, no longer brings that same sacrifice. So, therefore, we had to teach that just like they differ when they've been removed, so don't think they differ when they both committed the Avera while they're still in office. That's going to be the same. So even though they differ when they've been removed, but if they've committed the Avera when they're still in office, and then they are removed, then they still will bring that sacrifice. Okay, that's the technicality. Now, what's the source? Minahani Mili, that this is true. The Tanur Rabbanan, the Hikriv al Chataso. You bring it for that sin that you have committed. Okay. Milamid Shemevi Chataso Mishavar teaches us that you'd bring for something that you did previously, for an Avera you did while being the king, while being the Kohen Gadol. Excuse me. You would bring a chatas for that. So says the Gemara, do I really need a pasuk? I can't derive it from logic. V'halodinu, isn't it logical? Uman nasi, just like a king. Shemevi, he brings a sacrifice for just doing an inadvertent act, like a regular person. Shemevi b'shigas maisa, and yet ein mevi chataso misha avar, but yet does not bring an offering for the Avera that he committed. If the Nasi committed an Avera, if the king who brings a offering for a regular inadvertent act, yet once he's removed from his kingship, he no longer brings that sacrifice. He'll bring a sacrifice like a regular individual. Mashiach, a Kohen Gadol, she'ein maybe b'shikras. He does not bring an offering for a regular inadvertent act, only if he rules erroneously and then he acts upon it. Ela al helam davar im shikas myself lo kol shekain. So for sure he should not have to bring something when he gets removed. Talmud Lomar, that's what you would have thought. really logically you should derive that a Kohen Gadol should be derived from a king, because a king, we're stringent upon the king that he has to bring an offering just like a regular person for a regular inadvertent act, and yet we find a leniency by him that when he leaves his post, he doesn't bring the Kohen Gadol, which we're more lenient with, that we do not require him to bring an offering for a regular inadvertent act. We should for sure be more lenient for him when he's removed from his post. Says the Gemara, that's why you need a verse to teach you that no, the Kohen Gadol, even though logically he should have the same halacha and he should not bring when he's removed from his post. However, the verse teaches us that he still brings a sacrifice, even though he's no longer Kohen Gadol. V'nai sinami nasi mikal v'chomer. Now, a nasi, a king, should also have to bring a sacrifice from a kal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? Umamashi and maybe b'shigas maisa, a Kohen Gadol who does not bring a sacrifice for a regular inadvertent act, yet maybe chatas misha avar. So we have a leniency that he does not bring for a regular inadvertent act, and we have a stringency that he does bring a chatas misha avar once he's been removed from his post. Nasi maybe chatas b'shigas maisa, a nasi that we're more stringent with, that we require a sacrifice even for an inadvertent act. Eino dinshin maybe chatas misha avar. Should we not also be more strict and require a king to bring a sacrifice even when he's been removed from his kingship? Talmud lomar asher nasi yechta kishehu nasi in kishehu hedyot lo. The pasuk emphasizes only when asher is when, only when the nasi sins does he bring a sacrifice. But now when he is no longer the nasi, now when he's no longer the king, then he will not have to bring a sacrifice. So each one, the king and the Kohen Gadol, when they've been removed from their post, you would have thought differently than the Mishnah says, to which each one has a verse teaching them their respective laws, that a Kohen Gadol will bring a sacrifice and the Nasi will not bring a sacrifice. That was all the case of what happens when he's been removed. What happens if he did an Avera before he was appointed? So he does an Avera inadvertently, and the next day he gets appointed as king. Does he bring a sacrifice as king, or does he bring a sacrifice as a regular commoner? They sinned, both sounds like both the king and Kohen Gadol, when they did an inadvertent, they committed a avera inadvertently, and then they were appointed. They are now treated like commoners. And therefore, so meaning basically it means is you look at the time of the Avera. And at the time of the Avera, you look at their status. Whatever their status is, that's what they bring. Rabbi Shimon Omer, no, he argues. It depends. He needs two things: the time of the Avera, and when did they realize they did something wrong. Remember, a shogeg always comes inadvertent when you realize, I was impure, or oops, it was actually forbidden fat. So when did that oops happen? Rabbi Shimon Omer, im noda lahem achlo nismanu. If they knew about their inadvertent act, they found out about it before they became king or Kohen Gadol, then chayavim. Then they're going to be obligated to bring a sacrifice. Umishinismanu turim. But once they've been appointed, if after that they found out, so meaning between their committing the Avera and their finding out there was a status change in who they were, then they are going to be exempt. Then they're going to be exempt. Ezuhu nasi. So the word nasi that we've been using for a while now, who is that referring to? Well, in case we didn't know until now, Zemela. This is referring to the king. How do I know? Second time we've had this, that a king is defined by somebody who only has Hashem on top of him. He doesn't have anybody else on top of him. So Mikol mitzvah Hashem Elokav, Hashem his God, that there's no one else on top of him. He's not reliant on anybody else. That is the king. Okay, what's the source that they don't bring a sacrifice when they committed the Avera when they were not yet in a position of leadership? When the Kohen Gadol will sin. So if he will sin, so what happens? Prat lekodmos. So coming to exclude any sin that's going to happen before he became, meaning if it'll come that a Kohen Gadol will sin, excluding sins he did before he was Kohen Gadol. Says the Gemara V'halodinu, but there's a certain logic to it. Uman nasi maybe v'shigas ma'isa, ein maybe ala kodmos. Same as before, basically a king who we are more stringent with, that we require a sacrifice for a regular inadvertent act, and yet we do not require a offering brought for things he did previously. Mashiach, she'ein maybe we're more lenient. She'ein maybe ela helam davar im shigas ma'isa. He has to actually have a lapse and err and rule erroneously, and then act upon that ruling, not for a regular inadvertent act. Eino din shlo yavi ala kodmos. So for sure, the leniency should apply to him, that he shouldn't have to bring an offering for any previous averas, to which we're asking that you don't need a verse for that. That should be derived from logic. Lo. So if you can tell me that a king does not bring a sacrifice once he's been removed from his kingship, so he has that leniency, but the Kohen Gadol doesn't have that leniency. Even when he's been removed from his Kohen Gadolship, he still has to bring a sacrifice. So that's a certain stringency. So you will not be able to derive the Kohen Gadol from the king. So since he brings a sacrifice once he's been demoted from his position, he still brings a sacrifice. You would have thought that he should bring also for previous averas. Yavi ala kodmos. What should be the difference? So Talmud Lomar Hamashiach Yachta. Hamashiach Yachta. Chata kishu Mashiach maybe kishu hedyot eno maybe, that you only bring when you are the anointed one. You've been anointed. However, when you've not been anointed, when you before you became Kohen Gadol, when you're a regular guy, even though now you are the Kohen Gadol, but since you did the Avera when you were not the Kohen Gadol, so Kishu Hedyot Eno maybe, you're not going to bring a sacrifice. Okay. V'tanya nami gabe nasi Kohen Gadol. So it talks about a brisa about the king and about the Kohen Gadol. So it says, no, V'tanya nami gabe nasi Kohen Gadol. No, not Kohen Gadol. No. Meaning in a similar fashion, not Kohen Gadol, right? Yeah, sorry. Meaning a similar brisa is taught about the nasi. Asher nasi yechta, when the nasi. Now it's going to be important that the difference, nuanced difference in the two sections is that by the Kohen Gadol it says if the Kohen Gadol will come to do an aveira, and by the nasi it says when he will do an aveira, and the Gemara is going to pick up on it. It sounds like there's a decree. Once you become king, you will sin. And the Gemara is going to do that. Is that really true? Do we find such a thing? That Hashem promises sins that are going to happen? But so the Gemara is going to pick up on that nuance. But right now we're saying Asher Nasi Yechta Probably when the king will sin, coming to exclude when he's not king. Says the Gemara of Halal Din, who isn't there, you can derive it through logic. Just like a Kohen Gadol. He brings an Aveira once he brings a sacrifice once he's been demoted from his kingship, and yet that's a stringency. Eino maybe al hakodmos, he has a leniency that he does not bring it once before he becomes Kohen Gadol. A king who doesn't have that stringency, she'ein maybe chatasu mishavar, once he's demoted, he does not have to continuously bring a sacrifice for his inadvertent acts. So he should also have the leniency. Eino din shelo yavi ala kodmos. So you don't need a pasuk, isn't it? Just derived through logic that a king should not have to bring a sacrifice for things he did before he became king. Okay, but the Kohen Gadol, there's a certain leniency. He does not bring for a Kohen Gadol does not bring for a regular erroneous inadvertent act. He only brings when he ruled and then acted. Compared to a king who does bring for a regular erroneous act, meaning we are more stringent on the king. He has that stringency that it's easier for him to bring. I mean, not easier, but it's for a regular inadvertent act, he has to bring a sacrifice. So now, since maybe once he's bringing for a regular inadvertent act, maybe you would say that we're stringent on him in that area. We're also stringent on him to bring a sacrifice on things he did before he became king. Talmud Lomar Asher Nasi Yechta Shechata V'Harei Nasi V'Lo Shechata V'Odo Hedyo. he has to. The only time he's going to bring a sacrifice is when he's still king, and not when he remains a regular person. Okay, says the Gemara what we mentioned before. Taner Rabbanan Asher Nasi Yechta. So Asher Nasi Yechta, when the king will sin. Not like guarantee money in the bank. So Yachol Gzeira. It sounds like, could there be such a decree? Really? Like what's the heart of that question? Is the heart of that question a tremendous philosophical, what happened to free will? I mean, what exactly is that the heart of this question? The Gemara is saying, how can Hashem predict the guy's gonna sin? What does that mean? Is free will at the heart of this? You have to know exactly, but simply understood, you say you could learn the question to mean, well, is that really true? Do you ever find such a thing? Is it like, do you ever find it, or is it much deeper than that? Is like, how could that be? It's a contradiction to the whole system. So you have to know. Okay. Just like by a Kohen Gadol, it's if he will sin. So to here we're learning out it's if he will sin, not when he will sin, if he will sin. So now let's analyze this. One line brisa. Amar Mar Yachol Gzeira. You would have thought it's going to be a decree, meaning if not for the Kohen Gadol teaching us, you would have really thought that there's a decree he will sin. It says the Gemara Gzeira Meichetesi. So where is this decree from? Where similar question to before. Where do we have such a decree? Amri in, we have it. Ashichan Diksiv, Benasati Nega Tzaras, the bias Eretz Achuzastam. It sounds like when Hashem is talking about Tzaras, it says when you will go to Eretz Yisrael, you will find Tzaras in your houses. Sounds like there's a decree, meaning you will do something which will get you Tzaras in your house. But apparently we do find certain times where they will be decreed, you will do this. So Besura Hilahem, it's a announcement to them that Shahanegayim Bayim Alayim, that they will get Negayim Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So yeah, sometimes for whatever his great wisdom decreed, there will be times where there is a certain announcement coming that you will do X, Y, and Z. Okay, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Prat Lenige Onsen. Rabbi Shimon says, no, it just means that we're coming to exclude Nige Onsen, literally unavoidable Negayim, which is referring to, Rashi says, the blowing of a demon. So that it's only going to be tzaras if the tzaras comes in a certain kind of way and not by a demon blowing. That's what, like, unavoidable. That's not considered tzaras that we're talking about. It's going to come on its own, not through the means of a demon. Okay. So Lav Amar Rabbi Yehuda Besura. So Hachanami Eimag Zerahi. Just like Rabbi Yehuda told us that there is this announcement that you will do an Aveira that will get you tzaras. So too, according to Rabbi Yehuda, at least, say the same thing over here. When the king will sin, he'll do an Aveira. He'll kaksiv im. That's why you have to teach im by a Kohen Gadol to teach you that we're going to learn how to king from a Kohen Gadol. That it doesn't mean when he will sin, but really we're learning it to mean if he will sin, not when he will sin. Okay. Now, just technicality, we needed Rabbi Yehuda, but once we mentioned Rabbi Yehuda, we mentioned Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon said that for unavoidable acts, for unavoidable tzaras, like a demon blowing, that's not going to render the house a house of tzaras. So, essentially, how you know? Like, how do I know? I guess the Kohen was appointed to check out the house. He could see the demons. I don't know exactly. How would you know? Yeah. So Rabbi Shimon, is that really true that nige onsen milo metamu? So is that really true that kind of tzaras that is brought out by a demon does not impurify? That does not make you tameh? Is that really true? The Hatanya, but the Brisa says Adam kiya min hadibor. So it says Adam kiya. So there it's talking about tzaras. When a person will get tzaras, Adam kiya, when it will come. So that the Gemara means, what does it mean when it will come? It means min hadibor ve'elach. Only tzaras that comes after the Asaris Adibros, after the 10 Commandments. But any tzaras that you got beforehand is not going to impurify. Okay. V'halo dinu, there's a certain logic to it. That what? Tame bezav. Tame bezav, v'tame benegayim. It says that one is a person who's impure by a zav through different emissions, and one is impure when it comes to tzaras. Ma zav min adibra ve'elach, af negayim min adibra ve'elach. Meaning, why don't I need a special verse by negayim to teach me that only the tzaras, that is after we got the Ten Commandments, is going to impurify me? I don't need a verse for that. I should just pattern it after the emissions. Emission is after we got the Seres Dibros. So pattern tzaras after that. Af negayim min adibra ve'elach. So says the Gemara, lo, imamras bezav shekain ein metame be'ones. A zav is not going to be considered impure if his emission comes through an unavoidable accident. Rashi says, like, if he falls down or something, or he gets burnt, or a demon, that is not going to impurify the zav. Tomar ben Negayim, would you say the same thing? Shemetamin be'ones. Negayim do impurify even through unavoidable things, like a demon. So that's why it had to specifically teach you that it only is going to apply after the after the 10 Commandments. But what do you see? You see clearly from the Brisa that a person can become impure if he gets tzaras even through other means, like a demon, to which the Torah had to teach you, yes, that you will be impure, but not things before the 10 Commandments, only afterwards. So that is a contradiction to Reb Shimon. Rava Amar, prat lenige. So Rava says, what it means is prat lenige ruchos, and Rav Papa Amar, prat lenige kshafim. So Rava and Rav Papa both are coming to say, they're going to answer for Reb Shimon, that tzaras brought by winds or by sorcery sounds like that's going to be excluded. But what? But tzaras by a demon will impurify. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the basically according to Reb Shimon, what's going to be excluded is either by winds or by the demon or by sorcery. When the Brisa said you're obligated for tzaras that comes through unavoidable accident, it was talking about, let's say you fall down or a certain burn, and somehow that gets you the same signs as tzaras. And according to Rav Papa, when Reb Shimon said that tzaras is not going to impurify when it comes to unavoidable accidents, it was talking about through sorcery. But the Brisa that says that we're talking about that you will be impurified through tzaras, that can even be referring to a demon. It's just not referring to sorcery. So different variations of how you are going to be impurified through tzaras, even through unavoidable situations, either some kind of burn, maybe, or maybe as long as it's not sorcery, but maybe a demon or different winds would still impurify. A king that sins coming to exclude a chola. Says the Gemara, what? If the king gets a fever and he does an avera, he's not liable? Because you got sick, you're no longer a king, and therefore you're not liable for your inadvertent act. What does that mean? Sick means that he got tzaras. Shenemar, by a story in Malachim, Vayinaga Hashem es Hamelech Uzziah, who was the king of Uzziah, that he got tzaras. But he mitzora ad yomosa, he got tzaras, and the day he died. But Yeshiv bebeis hachavshis, he sat in the house of the chavshis. The Yosam ben Hamelech alabai shobed es amart. The Yosam, the son of the king, he became the ruler. So you see, he got tzaras, he was no longer the king. He was sitting in the house of the free house. Translated literally. I know they translated, but yeah. So now it's interesting. So we said before that the king, the only person that rules on top of a king is Hashem. Here we're seeing a different part of the kingship. once he becomes the king, it says he's now in a free house. That's what he's described as someone who's no longer in a position of leadership. Says the Gemara, Mechlal Da'ad Hashta, but until now, when he was king, Eved Hava, he was a slave. A slave to who? A slave to the people. He was working for them. Yeah. So, yeah, it's good for board meetings. Yeah. Ki Hador ben Gamliel Rabbi Yeshua, Havi Asli B'Sinas, and they were going along the boat. So here comes, I think, our first story in Horayot. So, yeah. So I guess if you make it this far, you get a story. That's the prize. Ki Hador ben Gamliel Rabbi Yeshua, Havi Asli B'Sinas, they were going on a boat. And what happened? Bahadi, the Rabbi Gamliel, Havi Pita. With Rabbi Gamliel was bread. You got to bring food. Bahadi Rabbi Yeshua, Havi Pita V'Sulta. With him, there was bread and flour. So, Shalom Pita Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel finished the bread. They finished the bread of Rabbi Gamliel. So what happened? Samach Hasulte Rabbi Yeshua. They relied on the flour of Rabbi Yeshua. So they asked him, Amar Leimi Habi Hatada Habi Le Kuva Kule Hai Sulta. Like, it wasn't such a long trip. And yet you thought of bringing extra food. Wow. So he told them, Amar Le Kochav Echad Shivim Shana. There's a certain star that comes once every 70 years. Ula Umata Esa Svanim. It goes and makes the sailors' air go off track. Martin, I said to myself, Shema Yalav Yetosanu. Maybe that's going to happen. So every so often there's like this unavoidable traffic that you just, so you got to prepare. So Amarle, Kol Kach Be'adecha, Na'ata Ola Besfina. Like, you're so knowledgeable and you're on a boat, implying that you're going on a boat to do business. You're going to go sell stuff. Well, you're such a smart person. You shouldn't be doing here. You shouldn't be here, doing business. You should be up there on the pedestal. So Amarle, you're wondering about me, that I'm on a boat doing business and I'm so smart. You should wonder about two other people. Tamalai, Tama al Shnei Talmidim, Sheish Chabi Habasha. There's two guys on the land that's names are Rabbi Elazar Chasma and Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada. Both of these rabbis, Sheyodin L'Shire, they are so knowledgeable, they can be able to calculate how many drops are there in the ocean. Kama tipos yesh ba'am. And what happened to them? They don't have any bread. Velo beged lilbosh. They don't have any clothing. They're so poor. And look how wise they are. So nasan daito lahoshivam barosh. So sounds like at some point he wanted to appoint them. He sent a letter. You're going to be the heads of the Jewish people, the head of the court. So Kisha Allah, when he went onto the shore, he sent to them a message. Shalach lahem v'lo, and they didn't come. Chazer v'shalach ubo. The second time they came. So Amar lahem, he told them, you reject it because you thought I'm giving you a position of leadership, and you want to run away from honor. You have to run away from honor. I wasn't offering you. When I said you should be the head of the Jewish people, I wasn't offering you leadership. I'd rather, turning the page, obviously I was offering you slavery. That's what you're doing. To be the head, I was offering you slavery, not leadership. Shenamar, as it says, Vayidabru elav lemor, im hayom tiyeh eved la'amazeh. Says the Malachim that you're going to be a slave to the nation. We're talking about a king. He's going to be a slave onto the nation. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. On the one hand, no one's above you. Only Hashem. That's what the Mishnah said. On the other hand, your whole job you're doing is for the people. So it's a hard. On the one hand, you have to only have Hashem on top of you. On the other hand, you have to make sure that you're serving the people. It's a hard balance. Kana Rabbanan says the Brisa. A few minutes, yeah. So Asher Nasi Yechda, when the king will sin, Amr Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he now interprets the word Asher, which we said doesn't mean when he will sin, it really means if he will sin. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai interprets the verse like Ashrei, praiseworthy. And here gets more, a little bit more, I got it, a little more philosophical. Ashrei Hador, praiseworthy is the generation, Sha'anasi Shalom, maybe Korban Ashaga, so who he brings a sacrifice for his inadvertent act. It's because why? Im Nasi Shalom maybe Korban. So Tzarich Atalomar, Mahu Hedyot. If the Nasi himself is not embarrassed, he's able to bring he's humble enough to bring his sacrifice. You see, he makes mistakes. So for sure, a regular person can also have that level of humility. The Imal Shagaso maybe Korban Tzarich Atalomar Mahu Zidono, and for sure, if he brings on his inadvertent act, so he's going to bring if he feels that way, that he's, oh yeah, I did something wrong, I'm going to go bring a sacrifice. He's so humble. For sure he's going to feel that way if he does an advertent act. And Rashi says he's going to be chozer b'tshuva. Of course he's going to do tshuva. So it's so praiseworthy when someone of leadership can say, I made a mistake, I made a mistake, and I can bring in sacrifice for that, because how much more so will the regular person feel that way? And how much more so will the king feel that way when he does something advertently? You could have thought, though, that an advertent act he's much more embarrassed about. But the Gemara says not that way. It says the opposite. If for an inadvertent act he's able to bring a sacrifice, for sure for an advertent act he'll feel so bad, he'll for sure bring a sacrifice. Interesting. So, we have 5 minutes, yeah? I'll watch this fast. Yeah. This doesn't tell me the time when it's. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, Maskef la Rava, braid the Rabba. So, Rava, the son of Rabba, says the following. Elameata, according to the way you just interpret Asher to mean Ashrei, where do you stop? Is every Asher going to be Ashrei? It says that when it comes to Me'ilah, it says that a person who sins has to pay. Whoa, praiseworthy is the guy that mistreats holiness. Is that also how you read it? Or what about Yeravam ben Avad, a terrible Russian that said Asher Chata? What does that mean? Ooh, praiseworthy is he who did an Aveira, a terrible person. Asher Hichti, and he caused others to sin. Who's so praiseworthy? So Hachanami da Asher Yadoru. You say the same thing. How praiseworthy is that generation? Says the Gemara, no. Shani Hachat, Shani Krabba Dibure. Our Asher that we pointed out originally, it really should use the word if, not Asher. The fact that it should have used the word if and used when lends room to interpretation. The other words, it means when. So we're not going to take a when and make it into Ashrei. But we will take a when that should have been an if and make that into Ashrei. Darash Rav Nachman, Barav Chisna Ma'id Eksiv. What does the verse mean in Kollel? Yeah, in Kollel. That Yesh Hevel Asher Nasa Al Aretz. So there's futility in the world, and Rashi says, the verse continues and says that there are tzaddikim, there are righteous, Asher Magia Aleim Kemaisa Rishayim. There are tzaddikim that get the same fate as the Rishayim, as the wicked, and V'yesh Rishayim Shemagia Aleim Kemaisa Tzaddikim. Amarti Shagam Zehevel. Basically, you're going to have wicked suffer and righteous prosper. So, says the Gemara, Ashreihem litzadikim, praiseworthy are the righteous. Shemagia eleim kemaise harishayim shal olam haba ba'olam hazeh. Praiseworthy are the tzadikim who get reward that the righteous will get, that the wicked will get in the next world, in this world. Praiseworthy are the righteous that get the same fate as the wicked in the next world, meaning suffering, in this world. And the opposite, woe is the wicked, shemagia leim, who are prospering, like the tzaddikim are prospering in the next world. Kemai said tzaddikim shalom haba, that they get so much reward, ba'olam hazeh. So, says the Gemara, Amar Rava, atu tzaddiki, I achli trei almi, visani lahu. What's wrong? What's wrong if tzaddikim get to benefit in both worlds, in this world and in the next world? Okay, let's stop here.